I so wish that this hearing was one where we were having a robust intellectual discussion, taking advantage of the brilliant minds that we have in front of us about free speech, the limits of free speech, and so forth. I fear that we have gotten away from that. I think the one thing that everybody in this room would agree on is that not all speech is protected or acceptable. For example, when elected officials lie, that's unacceptable. And that sometimes means that they have to be removed from academic institutions where they may serve on boards, or in the case of Harvard, the Senior Advisory Committee, based on false claims of election fraud. But moving on to the subject of this hearing, let me just say, as a Jewish mother of 2 students who are now fully launched, and I had to send off to college not so many years ago, I am very, very sympathetic to the concerns of the students and the parents about their safety, emotionally, physically, and otherwise. But it's not just about anti-Semitism. It's about all forms of hate speech, whether it's anti-LGBT, Islamophobia, whatever it is, racist language. Our students deserve a place of safety, and again, emotionally and physically. But at the same time, I think of college as the place where we learn to think critically. And to me, that's the most important part of going to college. So here we are in this strange balancing act, and believe me, I feel for all of you, because it is a balancing act that you have to perform. So at what point do we determine, or do you determine, that speech is such that it incites violence or it constitutes hate speech? And I'm going to ask President Magill from my home state of Pennsylvania. You saw a video at the beginning of this, and to the extent that the protests at Penn were referenced, did you see that video as an example of hate speech or speech that would incite violence?
I appreciate the question from the representative from the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I mean, that video, just as a human being, was very hard to watch. The chanting, I think, calling for Intifada global revolution, very, very disturbing. And I can imagine many people's reaction to that would be one of fear. Mm-hmm. So I believe at a minimum that is hateful speech that has been and should be condemned. Whether it rises to the level of incitement to violence under the policies that Penn and the city of Philadelphia follow, which are guided by the United States Constitution, I think is a much more difficult question. The incitement to violence is a very narrow category.
So let me just ask you there, if you became aware that a similar protest or rally, or whatever you call it, was going to be occurring on your campus tonight or tomorrow, how would you respond? What would your approach be?
Well, our approach with all rallies, vigils, and protests is that our public safety officers and something called open expression observers are at present at all of them. We have a long-standing open expression policy that makes sure our open expression policies are followed. So I would make sure that those people were there. Our public safety officers usually try to speak to the organizers of the conference and talk to them about what our rules are about protests. I'm sorry, I think I said conference. About protests.
Can I just stop you? Because,
yes,
as
please.
you know, these are really short hearings. Were any actions taken to shut down the protest? I think it was Sunday night, Saturday night, whichever night it was.
The Philadelphia police, their what's called their civil action division was the lead on this. And no, I think they were there to make sure there was no incitement to violence and no violence. I don't think any actions were taken.
Would you agree that your, in this case, Jewish students undoubtedly felt very uncomfortable following that,
I'm sure that's true, yes.
and I'm sure you've heard from many of them and their parents as well.
Yes, yes. And there were acts associated with that protest which were defacing some buildings, which clearly would unquestionably be a criminal action, and the police are trying to determine who did that.
Thank you. Unfortunately, as usual, my time has expired, but I hope we can continue this conversation in another format.
Thank you.